tonight is Purim in most of the world. In Yerushalayim, we have another day, and Tezvav Purim de Mukafin. So the topic we will be discussing today is Mikra Megilla, but not only Mikra Megilla, because the weekend, no longer Purim. So we talk today about Kavana b'mitzvahs, primarily, specifically, mitzvahs shebedibur. So we will discuss an extremely relevant question regarding Mikra Megillah, but not only. So let me start off by explaining there are 5 different concepts of Kavana b'mitzvahs. In essence, 5 different categories, 5 different types. And let me briefly explain. Rosh Hashanah Chav Ches, there's a machlokes Gemara whether mitzvah strichas kavana or ein mitzvah strichas kavana. Machlokes Rishonim. What is the halachic ruling? Shulchan Aruch brings 2 opinions. Siman Samach Siv Daled Hilchos Kriya Shema. Yesh oimrim mishum mitzvah ein strichas kavana. Yesh oimrim shemitzvah strichas kavana. V'chein halacha. So Shulchan Aruch paskins mitzvah strichas kavana. What is the nature of this kavana? Very fundamental, very basic. Nothing very spiritual or lofty. The awareness that a person is oisig b'mitzvah, and not just a ma'aseh shel rishus. Just being aware and having a fundamental will to be makayim a mitzvah. What are the examples of the machlokes mitzvah sichas kavana? Hatokei l'shir. Person is blowing shofar on Shuna, but he has no intention to be makayim mitzvah shofar. He likes the music. He's trying to do some classical music with the shofar. According to the mitzvah, mandom mitzvah saying sichas kavana is yoytza, nevertheless. Mitzvah sichas kavana, he had no intention to perform a mitzvah. Kafu v'yochal matzah. Person had no intention of eating matzah. He's not from. Doesn't mean anything to him. Somebody is hitting him and forcing him to eat matzah. That's the machlokes. Yotza or lo yotza. In Mechas Osha Kloli HaMitzvahs, there's a big arichas about Mitzvah Sichas Kavana. It's an amazing sefer, and as it is printed, it's out of print. And I brought out some achronim say Mitzvah Sichas Kavana we learn from La'avda B'chol Avavchem, according to the Ramban, and I wrote I think it's a mistake. La'avda B'chol Avavchem means, according to the Ramban, your avodah should be l'shem shemayim. That is beyond dispute. That is beyond dispute. Everyone agrees. And there could never be a machlokes about this. That lechatchila it is ra'ui, it is fitting. When a person does a mitzvah, it should be bilti l'shem levadoi, with no other motives, with no other interest. Lasois nachas ruach l'kodesh baruch hu. That is a different concept. The machlokes mitzvah sichas kavana is, in my Agdora, why are you doing this? So the Chayyim says a person comes into shul and he davens shachris and sukkos, and before halal he takes his dalad minim and makes a brocha, he's minanea, and then he says, "Wow, I planned today's trip. I didn't have in mind to be makayim mitzvah lulav." Chayyim says, "Of course he's yoytza." What is the explanation? Why? Sibas asiyas tvorim. If you tap the man on the shoulder and ask him, "Why are you doing this?" What would he say? "Don't you know it's Sukkos? We have a mitzvah of lulav." That is enough. Tokei l'shir, if you'll tap on the shoulder and you ask him, "Why are you blowing this horn?" What would he say? "I enjoy the music." Kafu v'yochal matzah. You'll ask him, "Why are you eating matzah?" How will he respond? "Don't you see the guy's killing me? I have no other option." That's the machlokes of mitzvah sichas kavana. So mitzvah sichas kavana is a very fundamental awareness. Yes, I have in mind to do a mitzvah. That's number 1. Number 2 is asiyas mitzvahs lishman. That is the Ramban la'avda b'chol avavchem. And nobody argues, but that is not ma'akev b'di'evet. That is just lechatchila. Number 3, understanding what you're saying. There's a difference between Ashiyotzer and Oisa Masa Bereshis. There's a difference between Sha'akal Niyeh V'Dvoroi and Amoitze Lechem Min Ha'oretz. There's a difference between refu'enu and atochein and lo'odem das. You need to understand what you're saying. That is number 3. That kavona is ma'akavoni berchas avos b'shmoinesre posek rishon shel kriyas shema. That is number 3. What's number 4? A bach. Specifically 3 mitzvahs. Tzitzis, tefillin, sukkah. Besides the general concept of mitzvah sichas kavana, because the Torah explains these mitzvahs, tzitzis lamantis kuru v'sisa miskol mitzvosai, tefillin lamanti yeh Torah Hashem b'ficha, sukkah laman yedu derosechem ki b'sukkah seshavti es b'nei Yisrael. These 3 mitzvahs, you need to bear in mind the reason of the mitzvah, ta'amei mitzvahs. That is number 4. And finally, number 5, lishma. The concept of lishma is twofold. Sometimes basiyas maseh mitzvah, and sometimes bachonas chefze the mitzvah. You can't be makayim mitzvah tzitzis only if the tzitzis were put on the beged lishma. Sefer Torah tefillin v'mezuzos, you need ibud aklaf lishma, ksives advorim lishman. A get is invalid unless it was written lishma. You need to bake matzahs mitzvah lishma. So the concept of lishma is yichud. It is designation. Designated a maisa or a chefza to a certain usage, to a certain matorah, to a certain avoida, and that is the geder of lishma. So this is a very brief introduction. I wrote at great length about each and every one of these yesodis. So there are 5 different categories, types of kavanas mitzvahs. Mitzvah derabanan, haim tzorech kavana, machloikes. Tshuvas Radbaz, Elef Tzadik Dalet, quoted by the Mogen Avraham Semesamach Sif Kotten Gimel. Mitzvah sichas kavana only by mitzvah deoraisa, mitzvah derabanan, ein tzorech kavana. Mishnah Berurah disagrees. Sif Kotten Yud, and he brings many sources to prove even a mitzvah derabanan tzorech kavana. Whatever we said up to this point is general. Lav dafka b'mikra Megilla. And now we start dealing with Megillah, but we still will speak about more general concepts and not only Mikra Megillah. Kosav Rambam Perik Beis Alocha Hei Koro V'loi Kiven Liboy Lo Yotza. Why not? Why wasn't he Yotza? Maggid Mishnah says 2 things. Number 1, Rambam Nishitos Mitzvah Sichas Kavana. So that would go against the Radbaz, because Megillah is a Mitzvah Derabanan, and the Rambam writes Sicha Kavana. But then the Radbaz writes, maybe Megillah is an exception. And regarding Mikra Megillah, everyone would agree. Leisman de Palik shetzorech kavana. Satam velo piresh. The Maggid Mishnah doesn't explain why would Megillah be an exception. Why? Pri Chodosh, Siman Samach, Tzif Kotten Yud Gimel, says because of Pirsum Enissa. Without intent, you have no Pirsum Enissa. So I think according to the Pri Chodesh, this halacha is similar to the Bach. When the Torah writes what is the reasoning of the mitzvah, you need to bear that reason in mind. Same b'divrei chachamim. And if the reason of this mitzvah is Pirsum Enissa, there is no Pirsum Enissa without kavanas hamitzvah. And now we come to a problem. Koroi misnamneim tofrei tzadik yud beis yotzi yedei chavosoi. Shama misnamneim lo yotzi yedei chavosoi. So what is misnamneim? I don't know what the term would be in English. You're not sleeping. When a person is sleeping, he can't read. You're drowsing off. You're extremely tired. Your eyes are closing. But he is successful to read the Megillah. But if you're merely listening and you drowse off, lo yotzi yedei chavosoi. Mishnah Berurah, Sif Kotten Lametes, quotes the Pri Megadim. Koro misnamnim yotzi yedei chavosoi. Afar bishu misnamnim yochel achaven. He still can have kavana. Mishnah Berurah, Sif Kotten Mem writes that it's a deichak. I don't know why it's a deichak. I think the Mishnah Berurah is a bigger deichak. Mishnah Berurah writes, it's unreasonable. Even if he's misnamlim, he still has Kavana. The Mishnah Berurah says, it is enough that he started the Kriya with a Kavana, even if he's misnamlim be'emtza and he lacks Kavana. This concept of kol Weiss al das rishoyne hi oisa is found by Lishma. And it's very mistaver by Lishma, very reasonable. Lishma is yichud, it is designation. And that depends on tchilas advorim. When I start reading the Megillah, I start writing tefillin, I start writing a parsha, start writing a get, start kshiras atzitzis. That is the major designation. Miyachid dvorim l'shem etzitzis l'shem atzis mitzvah l'shem ksiva sefer Torah. But regarding kavanas mitzvah mehechet, why would it depend on the beginning? It's not so mustava to say kol Weiss al das l'shoyn yoshu regarding kavanas mitzvah. I think the Pri Megadim is more mustava, especially as I explained. The entire idea of mitzvah kavanas is not more than an awareness. Why are you doing this? And that is intact even if he's misnamlim. After all, he's reading. He didn't fall asleep. Masha enken shoma misnamlim. And this brings us to a big problem. The Megillah is quite long. It's the longest Kriya. And it's very hard for some people, especially after a fast day, to be totally alert. If you read the Megillah, then you can't drowse off. But if you listen, Shama Misnamlim Lo Yotza. There's a Rosh. Chuvas Rosh Klal Dalet Semenutas. And thus shares his personal minhag. When I say Birchas Yoitzer, Birchas Kriya Shema, Adi Shachas Ravis, even though Miyakarid in the Shliach Tzibah could be Yoitzer, anyone, only by Shmoinesa, which is Rachamei, the halacha is Lechatchila. If you're Boki, you can't be Yoitzer with the Shliach Tzibah. But other brachas you can. But the Rosh says, because it's a bracha arucho, and it's very difficult, Lo lahaflig lidvorim acherim, I prefer saying balachash together with the shliach tzibur. The same we find in Siman Kuf Pei Gimel. It's born in Shechanoch Nun Tes Lagabe Berchas Yoitze Berchas Kriya Shema Kuf Pei Gimel Betfilas Azimun. So Miyikar Adin, when the person says Rabbi Shem Evan Bench and he's mezamen, he should be moitzi all the others with Berchas Hamazon. But the minig is everyone says Berchas Hamazon. And the Mishnah Berurah Kuf Pei Gimel Sif Kotten Chav Zayin explains because it is a relatively long bracha, and you might think about other things. So this Rosh is a gavaldige chiddush. Why lo yotzi dechavasa? Why is it ma'akev? Kavana is not ma'akev b'shar brachas. So the Bialoch and Semenun Tes, it's a big doichik. But he argues lo yotzi dechav is mitzvah min hamuvchar. Aval bevadei sheyotzi dechav. The Mishnah Berurah contradicts what he writes in Kuf Pei Gimel. Lo yotzi dechavasa. The Lashon of the Rosh is hifsides abrocha. And the Bes Yosef goes beyond that, lo yotza. And the Mishnah Berurah writes, v'doiche godel, sometimes lo yotza means lo yotzi de mitzvah min hamuvchar. The Rashba, Chuvas Rashba Chelak Aleph Tov Samach Zayin, quoted in Shulchan Aruch Tov Reish Tzaddik Aleph, writes, if the one that reads the Megillah skips one word, nobody is yotza. But if you're listening to the Megillah, ein tzorech ledaktik b'kol teva v'teva. What does he mean? Ein tzorech ledaktik b'kol teva v'teva. Machlokes Taz Magen Avraham. The Bacha and the Taz say, yes, like the Rashba writes. Ein tzorech ledaktik b'kol teva v'teva. You skipped a word or two, still okay. The Magen Avraham says, no, the Magen Avraham is machmir. Sif Koten Tezvav. Magen Avraham says, Mistoma Shoma Kol Teva V'Teva Afal Pisha Einoi Medaktik. And the Ravush Esrad, explaining the Magen Avraham, writes, a Gevaldige Chimra. As long as you listen to the Megillah, V'Einoi Choyshev Machshavas Acheres Yotza. Choshev machshavas acheres lo yotza. That's shocking, frightening. Most people listening to the entire Megillah, which is long, of course, according to the Levush Yisrael interpretation of the Magen Avraham, lo yotze yedei chavosai, that's a huge chibur. So what do we do? Let's say Sider Choiva al kol atzdodim in Mikra Megillah. Some poskim say it's kedai to read balachash, just like the minig of the Rosh, babirchas yoitza, babirchas kriyashama, kal v'choyim ala Mikra Megillah. The Mishnah Berurah deals with this question in 3 different sources that he contradicts himself slightly. Tofresh Tzaddik Sivkot Nechavav. Tofresh Peites Sivkot Niyutes. He writes, everybody should have a Megillah Ksheira and read together with the Bal Koira, together with the Shliach Tzibur. And as in Tofresh Peites, he writes it primarily because the children make so much noise by Haman that you can't hear. So that's the right thing to do, to read Balachash. Kach Kosav Kitzur Shulchan Aruch Kuf Mem Aleph Yud Gimel. Everybody should read Balachash, like the Magen Avraham brings in the name of the Prima Godim. However, not the Magen Avraham, the Mishnah Berurah. However, the Mishnah Berurah still from Torah Tzaddik, Siv Kotten, Yud Gimel brings Yesh Machmirim, not to read together with the Shliach Tzibur. Because if you read together with the Shliach Tzibur, you will focus on your own personal reading, and you might not listen properly to the Shliach Tzibur. And that's the opinion he quotes from Eliyahu Rabbah Machzas Shekel Ma'amar Mordechai based on the Rashba. Which of the 2 minhagim is preferable? I think not to read Balachash, for a few reasons. By Shmoyne Esrei, people understand that Lachash is a Lachash. But by the Megillah, there's a real substantial chashash that everybody will whisper. If you had 150 people whispering, then it's quite noisy. And some people will have difficulty listening to the Shliach Tzibur. Is that a reason to tell the individual not to be machmir and koira balachash? No. But there are other reasons. The Beis Yosef Tofresh Peites says, even though by all the other mitzvahs shebedibet tzorach loitze b'svosav ein tzorach lashmiya ba'oznav, Megillah tzorach lashmiya la'oznav because of persum enisa. And if it's not audible, you're not yoitze. There is no penusum enisa. So according to the Beis Yosef, you can't say entirely lachash like the Shmoyne Esrei tzorach lashmiya la'oznav. The Briskerov maintains Megillah b'tzibur, like Tefillah b'tzibur, is only one. One is moitzi all the others. 10 people, each of them reading the Megillah, are 10 yechidim. They're not a tzibur. They're 10 yechidim. That's a vikuach between the Briskerov and the Chazon Ish. So I don't think the right minig is to read Balachash. So what is my solution? It is almost inevitable that a person shouldn't think about different things. I think if you follow the Balkoida with your finger on the Megillah, and you follow every word, that proves that you listened. You were aware where he holds. Beyond that, it's not le'ikuv. I always wondered, lo yez sheshoma ashuri yotzo. Person doesn't understand Lashon Kodesh at all. But he heard. Why was he yotze? Rashi Megillah Yud Ches writes, he could ask people afterwards to explain. So there is Persum Enisa. The Rambam writes he doesn't understand the words, but he understands what the Megillah is about. Rambam and Perush Mishnah, Megillah Yud Ches. So, Lo Yez Sheshuma Ashuri, he doesn't understand the word. It is inevitable that he's Choshev Machshavas Acheris. V'afal Piken Asif Shechanoch. Tofresh Tzaddik Sif Ches Shiyotzi Yedei Chavasa. So on one hand, I think the Bia Halacha and Semenuntes is right. He must be right. Eina Kavana Ma'keves. And you're listening to a Shliach Tzibur. It's quiet and sure. You hear every word. אף על פי שהפליג בדבורם אחרים, יוצא ידיך ועשה. However, the Beis Yosef is mashmenat. But if you follow the Shlich Tzibur with your finger, I think that proves you are aware of every word he is saying. וכך כוסף שלוש התשובות ארץ צבי כושק לברוב חלק א' סמ"ה. And that's his recommendation as well. If you follow the Shlich Tzibur in your finger and you're aware of every word he says, yotza. So accordingly, we must assume that when the Rosh says, my minig is to say balachash, maybe he didn't have a sitter before him and he davened bar peh. I don't know. The Oved Kemar Oved or the Oved Kemar Oved. I don't have a firm opinion. If you follow the Shlich Tzibur and you try to be awake and alert, Yotze Yedecha Vosoi. Koira Balachash, Yotze Yedecha Vosoi. But if you read Balachash, it really needs to be Balachash, not to interfere with the Kriya of the Barkoira, not to borrow your neighbors, and they will be listening to you instead of listening to the Barkoira. So this is a fascinating sugya, and we had some interesting maskonas. So last week's shiur was all about Mishloach Monos and Metones Levyonim. And the question is, why is there a special inyan Dafkan Purim? Metones Levyonim, Monos Alevi, the Bach right laharbois, achavo v'reyes. But why Dafkan Purim? Why is friendship and love and brotherhood more important Purim than Chanukah or Rosh Hashanah or Pesach or any other Zman? Libi Yoimeli. Hoder kiblu b'yemei Achashverosh. In Shabbos Daf Pezayin, the Gemara says, what's the pshat kimu v'kiblu? Kimu, ma shekiblu kvar. Bnei Yisrael were magdim nasar and ishma b'mamed ha-Sinai. But kofu lehem har kegigis, and they might have an argument. It was coercion. Hodor kiblu b'mei Achashverosh ma'avas aneis, writes Rashi. First time around Kabbalas HaTorah, Parshas Yisro, the Pasuk says, V'yisu merafidim, v'yachanu b'midbar. And then from the plural form, suddenly it goes over to singular. V'yichan sham Yisroel neged ahar. Not v'yisu, not v'yachanu, but rather v'yichan. And the Gemara dashans ki yesh echod u'belev echod. I think we find the same idea. B'yemei Achashverosh, kimu v'kiblu. You probably realize there is a discrepancy, a difference between Kri and Ksiv, Mikra and Mesoris. The Ksiv is Kiyem v'kibel b'loshin yochad, but the Kri is Kimu v'kiblu. And that's the same remes. Kimu v'kiblu ki'ilu Kiyem v'kibel, ki yeshechod u'belev echod. Kiyem v'kibel, al yedei rabim Kimu v'kiblu. But it was once again, ki yeshechod u'belev echod. Because it is only in that state that we are fitting to be Makabel Torah. That's what the Maral explains. And he asks, Shas Kriyas Yamsef, Shivchar Yamrosa, Mashal Aroi, Yecheskel V'kol HaNavim. So why didn't the Kodesh Baruch Hu give the Torah right there and then? They were elevated to an unbelievable madrega. The Maral says one ingredient was missing. And without that ingredient, there is no Kabbalas HaTorah, and that is Ki Yeshechod u'belev echod. So once again, it was Ki Yeshechod u'belev echod. Kiyem v'kibel, Kimu v'kiblu. The multitudes were makabel as if they are one, united, Kiyem v'kibel. And maybe that is the inyan of Leharbois Achavo V'Reyes Daf Kippurim. Zeicher, once again, we all came together, ba'avo v'achva v'sholem v'reyes, to be Makabel Torah, and to once again be Magdim Nasa Lenishma. So this is a time to bring people together, ba'avo v'achva v'sholem v'reyes, because this is a time of renewal, and to renew and rededicate all our efforts to Kabbalas HaTorah, and to avoid this Hashem, and to the love of Klal Yisrael. These are difficult times, and let us very much hope. Hu Rachamon, Hu Yasalon Enisim Neflos Kishem Shosiso Lavasenu Biyom Ameim Bisman Hazeh Shachodesh Baruch Hu Yagen v'yoshia v'yishmor. And we should be zocher b'kol yameinu to be as goyel tzedek b'mheiro v'yomeinu amen.